Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you the process behind this blue heron painting because it's finally finished. Yes, I finally finished it. It took me like a year to finish. And this is a commission for my dad. He told me to just take however long I needed on it, and I was balancing a bunch of other things, and I just got married in November. So things have been a little crazy, but I'm so glad I finally have this done. And now I just have to frame it. So yeah. So let's just get into the process of the final stages of this painting, shall we? Right here I have an almost dry brush, and I'm basically scrubbing along the shaded side of the moon just to create a gradient into the shadow. Then for some reason I couldn't focus on getting the moon done because I kept looking at areas of the flowers that I felt like weren't good enough. I don't know. Everything else was pretty much done besides the moon, but I think I just wanted to make sure the flowers were absolutely completely done so I didn't have to think about it, because the lack of shading on some of the areas and the lack of highlights were really distracting to me, so I couldn't focus on just making the moon look good. So I went back in and added some highlights to these rose petals that I felt like it really needed, and I also included some shading around the rose stems and the leaves. And to be honest, I went back and forth doing that to the leaves and the roses quite a bit. Finally, when I felt like it was at a stage where it wasn't distracting me anymore, I was like, before I touch the moon, I need to make the background darker. Because this is going to be a night sky, I did want to have a really dark blue background, but it was still too light, and I know I'm going to add stars in later that are going to illuminate the sky a bit. So it really needed some more contrast. So I'm just adding another layer of black paint, and as you can see, I'm pretty heavy-handed with this. Like, straight up, I just grabbed the tube of paint and squeezed some paint onto there. And I'm going in with a damp brush just to spread it evenly across the background. I wanted to make sure the background wasn't too streaky. It's very easy for gouache to get kind of streaky looking. It takes a while to get a smooth gradient of any kind, so that's why I just literally put the paint right onto the illustration board. I wanted to make sure it wasn't too sheer and then would just pick up the navy blue paint underneath and just muddy it up, you know what I mean? Because gouache picks up paint layers underneath, you have to make sure you have a higher paint to water ratio. If there was too much water in this mixture, it would have totally sheared out the background and make it look uneven and patchy. And we don't want that. We want this to be a lot darker. So yeah, that's why I put an excess of paint on the board, because I'd rather have too much, to be honest. I just love darker backgrounds with gouache. Oh my god. Because of the matte nature of the paint and how it just dries really flat, it looks so cool. I love it. It's like velvety kind of, and I thought this would go great with the night sky, and it would look so pretty. I lost all of my footage of doing the stars, so I had to switch to my phone on some parts for recording. I'm so sorry about that. I need to get a new card for my camera because a lot of my files were getting corrupt. Alright, so I finally made it to painting the moon, and I realized I was having a problem with creating craters when I intentionally tried painting in craters. It was just turning out like polka dots, and I did not want a Swiss cheese looking moon. Some craters are going to be more shallow than others, and I found that when I intentionally made the crater shapes, it looked too uniform and it didn't look organic enough. So I switched to a different method later on where I start dry brushing in some white or gray paint, and I did this without too much thought, because if I thought about it too much, it would look too fake. It wouldn't look organic enough. By dry brushing in unintentional shapes, it created a much more natural, uneven texture, and from then on I could build the shadows and highlights around the craters. So essentially I'm letting the paint and my unintentional scribbles dictate where the craters are going to go and what the shape is going to be. Alright, so right here is when I'm doing a lot of dry brushing with the white, and I'm slowly starting to get an understanding of what the texture should be like and the shapes of all of the holes, or whatever you want to call them. As I kept doing this, I got a much more organic and believable texture for the moon. And I also felt like the texture from this dry brushing was a really good transition into the shadow of the moon. I didn't want the shadow for the crescent moon to be too smooth, because then it would look very fake, and I want this to be somewhat believable. So that little bit of texture as it goes into the shadow, I felt like it really sold that this is a crescent moon. This is a 3-dimensional moon, and it is only lit on one side. Here I'm adding more highlights with straight up white gouache paint, very little water, and again just dry brushing that in, and you can see it's slowly creating some abstract forms. As I kept doing this, I started finding shapes that I never would have intentionally created, and I just started shading and highlighting the natural shapes that were happening. This one in particular was a lot more shallow looking, and I thought that added a good contrast with the other craters that were a lot more deep and kind of scooped up looking. When you look at the moon, there is a lot of different depth to it. They're not all uniform and, you know, Swiss cheese looking, like I said earlier. So I was really happy with this, and I just started shading and highlighting all the random little shapes that were created from dry brushing. Once I was really happy with the moon, I went on to the feathers. There were just some minor details I wanted to include, a little bit more texture into each feather before I started adding any more stars or any other details. So here I have a very damp brush, and I'm moving the paint in diagonal lines. This is just adding some texture to each feather so it looks kind of not stripy, but it definitely looks like there's little hairs that are all in the same direction of each feather. And I started by doing this with just using the paint that was already there, just with a damp brush. Then I went in with some white gouache and put in some lines. Don't worry, I am going to blend them out later. And I'm going to try and get a better setup for this. I did just buy another card for my camera, so hopefully I don't need to use my phone anymore, but my living room also only has one lamp. I don't know who decided that in Washington State, the living room doesn't need like an installed lamp. Every apartment I've had here has just been very dimly lit, and I don't understand why. I do have an art lamp that I need to move and somehow use on the floor. I've been painting on the floor. I can't use my art desk anymore because we currently have a baby gecko. Well, he's not a baby, but he's my baby. And his name is Cheeto, and he's awesome, and he's cool. And honestly, I don't like painting at a desk anyways. My back hurts. I prefer to paint on the floor like a gremlin, okay? But I just need to figure out the lighting situation and make a setup that works, because this ain't it. This ain't it. Then I wanted to make the moon glow, duh. So I got some white pan pastels, which are basically just chalk pastels, but they kind of look like they're in a makeup compact. And I literally just got a brush, dipped it in the pan pastels, and then brushed that on and smoothed it out with my finger. And honestly, it works really good with gouache. Gouache kind of leaves behind a very, very subtle sandpapery texture. It's kind of gritty, a little bit. And it actually holds onto chalk pastels really well. So I used this to create a nice glow effect without needing to mess up all the paint I already put down. If I were to go in with gouache and a wet brush, it would muddy everything I just did. So I just slapped on some pastels, and it was a very easy and convenient way to make it glow without having to redo all the paint I just did. Oh my god, this was my favorite part. This was it. This is the final stage. So for our wedding, we had black envelopes, and I used this silver calligraphy marker to address and label all the envelopes, and it was laying around. I was like, oh my god, I should add this to some of the stars. And I did, and I'm so glad I did, because it's a subtle metallic effect against all the flat gouache. Oh my god, it contrasts so nice. Are you guys ready for the reveal? Are you ready? Boom. Panel 1. Oh my god, the roses. And then this is panel 2. All those feathers! Oh my god! I added a lot of stars in this one. And then the moon and the head of the heron. Yes. And then this is what it looks like all together. I hope you guys like this video. In the next video, I'll show you guys how I frame it, and also the grand reveal when I finally package it up and give it to my dad. I can't wait to see his reaction. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video, hopefully next week. Bye!